Dear friends, hello to all. The weather is very nice in Israel right now. And today we arrived here on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. The temperature today is plus 86 degrees Fahrenheit, but there is a wind. We are on the coast. So where do we invite our viewers today, Laura? And we invite you today to the ancient city of Caesarea, which was also called Caesarea of the Sea, well, in order to distinguish this Caesarea from others. Yes, from our recent video, remember we talked about Benes National Park, Caesarea Philippi, where the city of Caesarea Philippi was built. So here is Caesarea Maritima on the sea coast and Caesarea Philippi in a completely different place. We have not yet reached the archaeological park, but we came here intentionally to show the preserved part of the aqueduct through which water came to Caesarea from distant sources, because the city had both public toilets, reservoirs with fountains, and so on. There was a high and low aqueduct. The names are related to the location of the sources. For 2 millennia, this structure was battered by the winds and the sun and sea waves, but still could not destroy this solid building to the end. After all, sandstone blocks are connected by the famous Roman cement mixed with volcanic ash. The aqueduct was finished with plaster of the high quality. Volcanic ash was also used in the solution. Roman technology allowed water to move under the influence of gravity with a minimum slope. Average slope 0.5 feet for every 3,280 feet. During the history of the development of the city, 2 lines of the upper aqueduct were built. The length of the first line of the aqueduct of the period of Herod the Great and the Roman governors is about 6 miles to the north towards the mountains of Carmel. The second line was built during the reign of Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century AD, which can be reminded of by stone tablet with inscription of that time. The aqueduct went in the same direction, but was much longer, and the third line, the so-called Lower Aqueduct, from sources located below the level of the city, was built already in the Byzantine period of the 5th–7th centuries. To the right of the bus you just see its closed vaults. The city on the coast built, who do you think? The Jewish king Herod, the same great and terrible Herod, whose name has become a household name, is the personification of absolute evil. But he was truly a great builder. After all, it was Herod who rebuilt the second temple in Jerusalem, which became an architectural masterpiece of that time, which amazed contemporaries with its beauty and grandeur. What about Masada? Remember? His offspring, Herodium. The palace is a fortress. We have not been there yet, but we will definitely visit. So the port city of Caesarea is also a construction project of Herod. The evil genius of the Jewish nation was born in Edomite, but his grandfather and father were forcibly converted to the Jewish faith. This is the only case in history when the king of the already declining Hasmonean Jewish dynasty, Johanan Hyrcanus, during the capture of Idumea in about 108 BC, forces the inhabitants to accept circumcision and live according to Jewish laws. The great builder, a genius of political intrigue, a man with mental disorders and outstanding organizational and leadership qualities, who left behind not only notoriety but also many artifacts on his ambitious construction activity in 22 BC, started the Caesarea project. and it becomes clear that the city was named in honor of Emperor Caesar Augustus Octavian, Herod's patron. Well, let's go to Caesarea. After the completion of large-scale archaeological excavation by the Italian expedition of 1959 till 1964, a national archaeological park was founded here, which since 2000 has been included in the preliminary list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The road to the park is very beautiful: cloudless blue sky, greenery and blooming Indian lilac, which in Israel is called Israeli. You like? Here we are already in the archaeological park Caesarea, at the main entrance south, and there are several of them, and we head toward the theater. I want to draw your attention to the fact that you look at what a convenient platform. Here is the shady part, so that guides and sightseers do not roast in the sun and the guide can calmly tell the introductory part very comfortably. Several artifacts. These are marble sculptures, but the way Herod did not use marble in his urban planning. Therefore, this is already a later period. In general, the city developed very actively before the first Arab invasion. The first object that we meet in our way is the Roman theater, the most ancient and he the first built here in the Holy Land. In general, of course, what self-respecting city without a theater? Those Roman city, Roman theater. I have always loved this food. Can you imagine what size the sculpture was if the size of the food? The word theater comes from the Greek word theatron, i.e. place to look. There is something to see in the theater of Caesarea, even if there is no performance. Is not it? By the way, the 2000-year-old theater venue is a theater and concert venue, including to this day. And now a few words from the history of the theater. The first Greek theater in the world appeared 500 years before the construction of this theater in Caesarea. Greek theaters were located in open spaces. The first spectators simply sat on the slopes in a semicircle, and only then the seats began to appear wooden and later stone. As we see here in Caesarea, the platform below, or else the orchestra, was the place of sacrifice to the god Dionysus. In the center stood an altar, and all around they sang praises to Dionysus and danced. The history of the theater began as an amateur performance for a small number of onlookers. And the first play in the world was staged at the Great Dionysus in the spring of 534 BC. Then for the first time an actor appeared who entered into a dialogue with the choir and could portray the heroes of myth. This is the birthday of the theater. Then it was during Dionysus that theatrical performances were held. At first only tragedies were staged, later comedies appeared. The tragedies of Euripides, Sophocles, Aeschylus and other early playwrights have survived to this day. The ancient playwright not only wrote the play, he was a full-fledged participant in the performance, playing the roles of director, composer, choreographer and even actor. And you know, in those ancient times, the profession of an actor was so prestigious that actors were even allowed not to pay taxes. It was an honorable profession. And also the playwright and actor of the 3rd century BC, Livius Andronicus, can be called the father of the modern phonogram. Before the performance he lost his voice and another spoke instead, and he just played. Things the actors put on and changed masks. They played without the help of facial expressions, but paid great attention to movement and clothes. By the way, do you know literally what a tragedy is? Tragedy is a chorus of gods, because Dionysus was accompanied by male choirs and the men dressed as satyrs, wearing goat skins. And now, from the upper tiers of the spectator seats, we will go down to more honorable, low spectator seats. To know, you might say. We came to the place of honor in the auditorium. Even then, well, this is not surprising. The audience seats were divided according to the social principle. Below, closer for the nobility, priests and honorary citizens, and in the middle for the middle class, and at the very top for the poor. We started at the top and came to the place of honor. Now too, not everyone can afford closer places, but the ancient governments, starting with Pericles, made it possible to visit the theater and join the beautiful, even for financially disadvantaged citizens. To do this, everyone was allocated a subsidy at first for one performance, and later then could even attend 3 performances. This theater was built on a flat area of Kurkar stone, and the most ancient theater in Israel. It is in fact, although not the biggest, initially it had 3,500 seats, but later it was rebuilt and a 3rd tier was added and 5,000 seats appeared, and the theater operated for 500 years. And as we said now, this is also a concert venue and quite successful. This rounded platform, which is now occupied by spectator seats, was called an orchestra in ancient Greek theater, and in fact it was a place of performance. At first, an altar to Dionysus stood in the center, and there was a show going on. We have a stage. We return to the initial theater. This is the dressing room for the actors. There were masks, there were all kinds of devices and shoes, clothes, etc. And it was a first simple dance. Subsequently, with the development of the theater, the stage naturally changed in the center, and it turned into a rather complex structure, which was in general a kind of palace. Actors came out from there, changed clothes. There were quite complicated machines for all kinds of sounds. Well, accordingly, the whole theater was built so that the audibility was very good, and every sound of the actor, each of his remarks, reached every spectator. Last look at the theater. This small archaeological park contains architectural decoration found in Caesarea. Look how beautiful! Go ahead, the next stop is in the palace of King Herod, or rather in what is left of him. I want to pay special attention to a copy of limestone slab with a dedicatory inscription, which is now stored in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. It says that Pontius Pilate, known from the New Testament as the procurator of Judea, built a temple sanctuary in honor of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. This unique artifact was found by archaeologists in 1961 on the ruins of the theater of Caesarea. Behind me, in the depths of the sea, the ruins of Herod's palace. They, like the ruins of the theater, city fortifications, and the upper aqueduct, were discovered by the Italian archaeological expedition led by Antonio Frollo, who excavated here in 1959 to 1964. The palace stood on sea reef and consisted of the lower western tier, right on the seashore, and the northern tier located a little higher. During excavations, archaeologists discovered in the lower palace part of the preserved mosaics the geometric patterns and the remains of a pool. The lower part of the palace was destroyed by the surf, and the northern part is better preserved with adjoining rooms, the remains of various rooms. It is also known that the famous Pontius Pilate lived in this palace. After the death of King Herod, this palace was occupied by Roman procurators. The famous Apostle Paul spent 2 whole years in Caesarea. From 58 to 60, the Apostle Paul was condemned by the Jews in Jerusalem for bringing the Gentiles to the Jerusalem temple. The Jews took him to the Sanhedrin for judgment. However, Paul could not be executed because of his Roman citizenship. Then Paul was sent to Caesarea to be judged by the procurator Felix, who left him in chains. And the new procurator of Judea, Porcius Festus, together with the Jewish king Agrippa II, decided to send the Apostle Paul to Rome for trial before the emperor himself. Thus, the Apostle Paul made the whole journey from Jerusalem to Caesarea and from Caesarea to Rome. This huge square is nothing but a stadium or a hippodrome. In 12 BC, when the celebrations of the opening of the city of Caesarea were celebrated, sports competitions were held here, and there is a legend that here, for the first time in the world, Herod the Great rewarded not only the winner, but also gave the second and third prizes. Thus, the concepts of second and third place in sports competitions were formed here, and this was the first time in the history of mankind. Later, the hippodrome was rebuilt into an amphitheater where gladiator fights, animal baiting, and other spectacles were held. The arena is surrounded by stands with stone seats for spectators, as you see around me. And I will tell you about one historical event that is connected with Jerusalem, Caesarea, the concept of Pilate and the Jews, and also this hippodrome. In the Jewish antiquities of Josephus Flavius, the following is told. Pontius Pilate, who lived in Caesarea, having entered Jerusalem, brought banners with the image of the emperor into the city. to outrage Jewish customs. Before Pilate, no one dared to do that. A crowd from Jerusalem came to Caesarea and begged Pilate to remove these images. The Jews molested Pilate for several days, and he ordered the soldiers to hide here in the hippodrome area. When the soldiers surrounded the newly gathered crowd of Jews, Pilate said that he would order the soldiers to cut down everyone who made noise. But the Jews threw themselves on the ground and buried their heads, preferring death to the transgression of the law. Then the astonished Pilate ordered that the images be removed and returned to Caesarea. I want to add that here in Caesarea in 66 AD there were Jewish unrest which subsequently led to an uprising against the Roman authorities. A little later, in 135 AD, during the uprising of Bar Kokhba, the famous thinker and theologian Rabbi Akiva was executed here in the amphitheater of Caesarea. In the Byzantine period, during the heyday of Christianity in the Holy Land, such famous people as Eusebius Pamphilus, the Bishop of Caesarea, as well as the thinker and philosopher Origen, lived here. Even before the official adoption of Christianity in the Roman Empire, Caesarea was a significant center of Christian culture. Here was the episcopal chair of the future local Jerusalem church. With the advent of Christianity in the Roman Empire, the importance of Caesarea increased. During the struggle against paganism, the temple of Augustus was destroyed and a Christian church appeared. There were also monasteries in the vicinity. Well, here we have reached the territory of the Roman baths, which were built already in Byzantine times, and the little story lies ahead. Oh, finally, we're in the shade. Here you can hide from the merciless Middle Eastern sun. And the Roman baths of Caesarea are worth mentioning separately. These public baths were distinguished by their special beauty, splendor and decoration. They were built already in later Byzantine times, 6th century AD. These are not just baths, these are baths. Those. Here they not only bathed, but also went in for sports. We will not bore you with complex Roman and Greek terms such as apatituriums, palestras, caldariums, tepidariums, etc., and their translation, of course. There was simply a dressing room where the cloakroom attendant met everyone, and if people had valuables, please have a cloakroom attendant at your service. There were also rooms for anointing with aromatic oils and rooms for physical exercises in the bath. And then, after playing sports, visitors could warm up in warm rooms called tepidarium. There were bathhouse attendants who cleaned the skin of dirt with special scabbards, an interesting historical moment that occurred in the baths under the Emperor Vespasian. The emperor went into the bathhouse and saw a legionary soldier rubbing his back against a corner. "What are you doing?" Vespasian asks. "I have no money for a bath attendant." "How does a soldier have no money?" Vespasian exclaimed and immediately gave out the amount of his bounties. The next day, many people who wanted easy money were already rubbing against the corners in the terms, but you can't fool Vespasian. I am walking around here, magnificently finished Roman public bath, with beautiful floors, magnificent columns. Well, since we have already remembered the Emperor Vespasian, we will also remember the phrase "money does not smell." This phrase owes its appearance to the incidents with the Emperor Vespasian. Leading the country out of the crisis, he, among other things, also introduced a tax on public toilets and on the sale of urine, what was very dissatisfied with his son Titus. In antiquity, the attitude to toilets was, let's say, just the opposite than it is now. Not privacy for you, just the opposite. While urinating political and cultural events were discussed, as well as all sorts of city gossip, in generally a kind of club of interests. So the emperor's son Titus reproached his father for this tax. Having received income from the tax, the father brought a coin to his son and asked if it smelled. No, and it's money from a urine tax. Many will ask who bought it and why. I will answer, using the properties of urine, bleaching agents for fabrics were produced as well as leather was tanned. Let's walk through the territory of the thermal. Time has preserved some parts of the buildings and mosaics that testify to their former splendor, and some of the technical devices, such as, for example, the Hippocaust, a heated double-floor system. Dear friends and viewers of our channel, I want to draw your attention to the fact that all the music that you hear on the channel is our copyright, and we called our creative duet with Laura West and East. Also, as a license guide from the Israeli Ministry of Tourism, I invite you on my private tours throughout Israel. The phone number is in the description of the video. On the seashore, they prepare for the Jewish wedding ceremony. In these shots, you see how the wedding canopy for the bride and groom is decorated. According to Orthodox rules, the canopy should stand in the open. And here on the seashore, this canopy is called Hapa. Hapa symbolizes the future home of a new family. The canopy is open on all sides, like the tent of Abraham, open on all sides as a sign of hospitality. Numerous guests will gather at sunset, and a romantic wedding ceremony will begin under the sound of the surf. She, by the way, is also called Hapa. In this city, as indeed in many other corners of the Promised Land, the Crusaders were noted, giving the city a new impetus to life after the decline during the reign of the Muslims. The walls are impressive. It was the King of France, Louis IX Saint, who in 1251 fortified the city again. Why again? Because the city was captured by the Muslim troops of Salah ad-Din in 1187. But after the Third Crusade, 4 years later, the Crusaders returned again, and if it were not for the Sultan Baybars with his policy of inexorable destruction, well, so that the Crusaders couldn't return again, they could see much more. The city was finally destroyed by its warriors in 1265, leaving it on oblivion for centuries. Let's go back to the bridge over the moat of the Crusaders near the sea. Today it is also decorated for the wedding ceremony. We go straight. Look to the right. Let's go to the left. Well, not in the figurative sense of this phrase, of course, but toward the ancient port. Hero the Great, in order to carry out his political and commercial plans, he needed a new fortified powerful port between the ancient port cities Jaffa and Dor. This is mentioned by the ancient historian Josephus Flavius. The construction of a large-scale royal port on the coast, where initially here is a non-natural bay, that is in the open sea, which can change from calm to stormy in a matter of hours, is by no means an easy task. It requires very serious preparation, planning of all components of the engineering project. Imagine how many trained builders were involved here, boats, all kinds of devices for digging in the sea, how many ships delivered materials from all over the Mediterranean, and how much more of this was necessary for the implementation of this grandiose and unique project. During the construction of the port, Roman concrete was used, when stone, lime and porcelain, a powder product, a mixture of volcanic ash, pumice and tuff, were poured into forms prepared on the shore. When the porcelain came into contact with water, it solidified, and thus the whole mixture turned into one large concrete block. Thanks to Herod, the port in Caesarea, which initially did not have any natural harbors, received one of the most powerful and fortified harbors in the region. But despite the most advanced construction technologies at the time, after 100 years, the port of Herod ceased to function. Researchers have found many reasons. These are earthquakes, tsunamis and terrible sea storms. But the main reason, as they would say in modern terms, is the lack of funding to maintain the port in working condition. It seems that Herod's grandiose project, which was so important to himself, was a little interest to subsequent authorities. To paraphrase the proverb, who does not work, he does not eat. We work hard, and we decided to eat well, and we went to Helena's restaurant for the first time. We'll see. I liked the restaurant at first sight. Sea view from windows, orchids, interiors, chandelier. Our choice, a seasonal lunch for two from Chef Amos Zion, where several dishes from the general menu are selected in small quantities to sample. I did not want to shoot, I wanted to eat, therefore briefly. Let's announce the whole list. Focaccia with olive oil and pomegranate sauce, salad with herbs, grapes, cashew nuts and sweet potato cream. Well, in appearance, I really like this capricious and salad. I think it will be delicious. Salad that tastes amazing. I have never tasted this. Fish carpaccio with beetroot and arach cream, with thick chrysanthemum leaves and a bowl of lemon sorbet with olive oil. Very original taste, I like. Squid with lemon, garlic and hyssop leaves enlivened with ginger, sea scallops in butter with parsley, red grapefruit and almonds. The main dish is sea bass fillet, amazingly roasted with thyme, almonds, homemade nijokes, and a creamy sauce with shiitake mushrooms. Dessert: milk pudding in syrup with almonds, a bowl of melon sorbet, drinks for an additional fee. Yes, haven't left yet, but want to go back. We would like to thank you for your attention and convey our warm regards to everyone from the port of Caesarea. Dear friends, this concludes our story. Subscribe to our channel, because statistics show that many people watch without a subscription. We invite you to subscribe, let's be friends, and become our regular viewers. We also thank our sponsors for supporting the channel. Thank you very much. All good health, happiness and prosperity to your families. Huge greetings from the Holy Land and see you next time.